Let's talk about the pre-termination of life before birth, or the big A. Surely it would be acceptable to God if it was a case of rape or incest. Sadly, most Christians, I think, would believe and agree with that last statement. But let's take a realistic look at what the Bible says and see if we can put an answer to this, and I think we can. Before we start with killing and pre-birth life, first we have to figure out what life is and how is it defined in the Bible. God defines it in the Bible as saying he took the dust of the earth and created Adam. Now we have to remember, when Adam was created from the dust, he was an eternal being. He had a lifespan of forever. He lived forever, like the angels. He's not an angel. Like the angels, he would live forever until he bit the apple, and that changed everything. But before we talk about that a little bit, I want to talk about life. This is where everybody agrees, even though they don't realize they do agree. All life on earth, as a matter of fact, everything you see on this earth comes from the dust. Now let me explain that. All life comes from the dust. So even if you have a tree and it's real tiny, it takes the nutrients from the dust to grow. The same with us. When we're born, we take the nutrients from the earth, whether it was changed into plants and vegetables and we eat it, or into other animals that we eat. It all comes from dust. And the atheists will agree with that because they say, this is our big difference here. We say an intelligent creature like God created man, and they say the earth just did it itself. It just somehow, even though that's not the way the earth works, but somehow things started sticking together and they have a consciousness now and an understanding, and they can explain that one because I can't. It just makes sense to me that it was created. We're too complex of being. Now, let me go back to Adam. Adam, when he bit the apple, that was the day of his death. He started to die that day. From that point on, he slowly withered away. And he never lived, if you think about it logically, he lived to like 930 years. He died in the first day because we remember, because he was eternal, he was with God. A day in the life of God with God is like 1,000 years, and he didn't live to that 1,000 years. He fell short. So he did die the day he bit the apple, in God's eyes. Okay, in part one, I already talked about Satan. Now I'm going to drag him further into this conversation because pre-life termination is based on Satan and his tricks. Now, what does Satan do? He started early on with the Gentiles and the Canaanites and these guys. And what they would do is they would pass their children through fire with the promise of riches and wealth and stuff like that, and prosperity and all this sort of stuff. So they would take their infant child and burn them to death, like for Satan. And it was a way of terminating the children. And the Israelites, when they went into the land, took over Canaan, what happened was they were supposed to execute everybody that was in the land, the people, the animals, everything. And they didn't do it. And it became a prick in their side for the rest of the generations they were in the land. They themselves began passing their children. They picked it up. If you saw my video on leaven, that's why that is my second video. It's extremely important because they were leavened by these people and they picked up on their processes, and they themselves were passing their children through fire. And that comes to now. Once Satan learned that trick, that he could get people, through their own greed and their own selfishness, to pass their children through fire, he got the key. That was the key. And he was easily able to pass that off because through our own greed, if you saw my last video on evil, through our own greed, we do evil things, we pursue, our happiness. They say, oh, child's going to burden you. It's going to do that. You won't have any money. You won't be able to feed it. all these promises. God will always take care of you. He always takes care of you. But they break that promise with God, so because Satan's tricking them into passing their children through fire. Only now it's a modernized version of it. But once Satan learned that trick, he did it. So I'm just going to read Deuteronomy 18:10. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through fire. He tells them specifically, he lays it down in Deuteronomy. This is the law. You do not kill your children. This was a practice done by the Ammonites. They would pass their children through fire to Moloch. This was what the Israelites picked up on. Let me read Leviticus 23. Let me read Leviticus 23. And I will set my face against that man, and will cut him off from amongst his people, because he hath given of his seed to Moloch, to defile my sanctuary, and to profane my holy name. See, this is a direct onslaught to God. That's why this is such a dangerous practice. And I don't hear Christians talking about this, this is extremely important. It's because, I hate to say this, I hate to, Christians just don't understand the Bible. They don't know the Bible. That's why I'm doing this video series, by the way. In Exodus 20, God's sixth commandment, thou shalt not murder. That plays into this too. We're specifically told not to murder. All right, I just want to talk about other reasons they give for this. They say, oh, what about for the sake of the life of the mother? You know what? Life is full of risks. Everything's a risk. And in the modern times with cesarean section, the risks are so minimal to the mother's life. Rarely do you see a mother die, but in the past, it was very prominent that kids would die. There was a higher percentage of the children dying and the mother. But life is built with risks, and these are risks that that are inherent to anything. I just want to talk about dying for somebody else's mistakes. And I want to get into incest and rape specifically. And this is where I'm targeting it. And, the Bible nails this like it does everything. You can't, they say, oh, you can't make a woman carry to term, the baby of a rapist or father, incest and that sort of stuff. Well, what does the Bible say about this? Let's get into this. What does God specifically say about this? Because this opens a can of words. I'm going to read Deuteronomy 24:16 because this kicks it through the uprights. The father shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the father. Every man shall be put to death for his own sins. So basically here, the mother, yeah, she's a rape victim, but basically so is the child, and you can't put the child to death for the sins of the father. And if we start going down that path, we'll get back to the way it used to be. Your father gets sentenced to 30 years in jail. Well, he dies after 20. Sorry, son's got to go to jail. Put him in jail for the last 10 years. Serve it out. We don't do that. We don't do that in our society. We don't do that in anything else. If the father dies and he owes a lot of money, the children don't have to pay it back. This is how society works. But here in this example, we flip it, and everybody sounds like they're all right with it. I've heard a lot of crazy things, and I heard it. I actually heard it in church. I had heard one guy tell me, he was talking about this subject, and he was saying it'll also help with global warming because there's less people on the earth. I almost fell out of my chair. I couldn't believe this, that I heard this from another Christian. And I'm not going to pick on this guy because he's a nice guy, but that's how, and he's a smart guy. That's how they have you buffaloed. They have you so twisted, and so agreeing. Don't be agreeable. Just go by what the Bible says. God gave us these rules. I think we've said enough on this topic, but I hope you can understand my point of view on this. And I don't expect you to hold my point of view on anything. I just give it to you, because there's not enough people given truly the Bible, like what the Bible says on things. And I'm trying to do that in in this video series to give you what the Bible's counters are to a lot of the popular things. Because like I said, Christians don't know the Bible. I don't know why, but they don't. Thank you. See you next week.